And now it's time for another edition of What Would Jello Do? What happens when the government riots? Part 1. Greetings from Riot World. And just why is this round of outrage and mass protests that somehow turns into riots even when the protesters aren't the ones starting the riots? Why is it so damn bad this time? Lot of things boiling over. Cops showing that black lives don't matter, while the Trump-amuck regime is showing that nobody's lives matter, basically. Martin Luther King said, "A riot is the language of the unheard." Will Smith said, "Racism is not getting worse, it's getting filmed." When the police attack first and start the violence that wrecks the protest and makes the protesters look bad, does that mean the protest is a riot? No, it means it's a police riot. Chicago 68 was a police riot. Peaceful demonstrators, how do you get the police to start to riot? Sometimes it may be one shot and then some scared kid in the National Guard who got dragged out from who knows where returns fire where they think the shot was and innocent people get killed. Or sometimes it's people who've been kind of planning something like this all along, using the oldest excuse in the book, outside agitators. I hadn't heard that term since the 60s, but here we go. Outside agitators. So who are the outside agitators? Landlords? There's so many fires. That was the first thing that came to mind. But no, the more word got around about how these things were getting out of hand, the more I realized we have far less to fear from outside agitators than from inside agitators. For example, they caught a guy in black with a mask and whatnot and an umbrella and a freshly looked unvarnished billy club, not even a baseball bat, smashing in windows to an auto zone on camera, kind of encouraging people to do the same. And then an African-American woman comes up to her and tells him to stop, and he just kind of laughs at her and walks off. The guy was later identified, or allegedly, a St. Paul police officer had come over to Minneapolis named Jacob Peterson. NBC later showed the footage and identified him as a white supremacist, but did not mention that he was a cop. St. Paul PD says, no, that can't be him. It doesn't look like him. He's got a mask on. He was part of the people we sent over who was keeping the peace right now. And then his ex-wife comes back and no, that's him. Some other friends say, yeah, that's definitely him. An ex-wife versus the cops. Who are you supposed to believe in a case like that? But either way, shouldn't any cop or government official who's outed as a white supremacist be fired on the spot? St. Paul cop or not, the fact is that cops do these things. And provocateurs do these things to try and egg a crowd on to do stupid stuff they aren't normally going to do, especially if they burn down independent businesses and minority-owned businesses in their own neighborhoods and don't go burn anything that rich people own. This, I have proof because this happened to me. During, when I was covering the LA, the Democratic Convention in the year 2000, W versus Gore, in Los Angeles, they're going to nominate Gore, and there was a big march on where they were having the convention, and we were going through downtown LA, and this guy who looked all black bloc, although you could see his face and provocative t-shirt and everything, a little bit older though, he knew who I was, and yeah, I mean, look at these windows, man. We'd just like to smash these windows. And I was like, well, yeah, I love the sound of breaking glass, but I learned in Seattle that one window gets broken and then the media goes crazy and claims a demonstration is a riot, which is exactly what happened in Seattle. It wasn't the pilots union or the nurses union marching anymore against the WTO. It was an anarchist riot. I wasn't going to be the one to blow it for everybody else. I said, no, I'm not going to do that at all. And he kept, come on, you pussy, you sell out your Jello Biafra. Why aren't you breaking windows? And these were minority-owned businesses in downtown LA. No way. And then it only occurred to me later, that was no black bloc guy. That was an undercover cop. He already knew who I was, and he came up to me and tried to get me to give him cause to arrest him. Sometimes it's worse. Many people who have heard about or remember the infamous Wilmington, California riot, a little municipality surrounded by Long Beach, Dead Kennedy's show, where the cops stormed in and drove everybody out 2 doors, so there was a big jam. They were whacking people on the heads on either side. Other cops were seen running up and down the streets of Wilmington, which has a union uprising background and whatnot, smashing out windows of small businesses and windshields of cars. And East Bay Ray said later that a woman he knew who worked at an ER in Long Beach nearby said that an LA County Sheriff's officer was there at 4 in that afternoon saying, "You need to have extra people on hand in the ER tonight. There's going to be some casualties." Next day, LA Times, punk band causes riot. Same thing a little bit later in San Luis Obispo, California. They were just starting to have shows there. We play in a big open hall in a city park, and suddenly the cops come storming in before we even got to play. And this wasn't LA, this was Keystone Stormtroopers. It was bad enough that in Wilmington, it wasn't Wilmington cops doing this, it was LAPD and LA Sheriff out of their jurisdiction. Here it was San Luis Obispo cops, Los Osos cops, Highway Patrol, all going crazy, jumping people, beating the crap out of them, including seeing one jumping a guy on crutches. And then the fire department showed up, turned on their fire hoses, and began putting out windows of neighboring apartment buildings. Next day, punk band causes riot. Osnabrück, in what was then West Germany. We play there, and we got trapped in the venue for 2 or 3 hours because the police had attacked the audience when they were leaving the shows. And even clear over here in the San Francisco Chronicle, San Francisco punk band causes riot. Every time it was the cops. But now, unfortunately, when you got the baklava or the masks or whatever, it's the easiest undercover cop disguise ever. Hat, shades, COVID-19. Who is anybody who says they're Antifa now? Some of them are the real thing. A lot of them aren't. The big anti-G20 protest in Geneva, Italy, about 10 years ago, that got really violent. At least one person died. And it turned out all the black bloc people starting all kinds of problems. It turned out it was the cops. I mean, this is just like COINTELPRO, where J. Edgar Hoover had people infiltrating radical groups and infiltrating the Panthers and even publishing newspapers, talking shit about other Panthers, and then the other one gets blamed and the violence starts, egging on people who would then break off from the SDS and become the weathermen to get violent with bombs, and then busting them. And the father of the district attorney of San Francisco City and County is in jail to this day for one of those. So, moral of the story, I don't care how a narco or Antifa somebody looks or what their shirt says. If they tell you, "Come on, smash it up," don't listen to them. Police riots. Dan White night after that guy got off for assassinating Harvey Milk and the mayor of San Francisco. The burning police cars are on the cover of Fresh Fruit for Rotting Vegetables. The cops lost control of that part of town around City Hall. Dianne Feinstein was trapped inside. But they just marched up to the Castro district. Let's go queer bashing. Smashed in all the windows of the Elephant Walk bar and then smashed the people inside. And after all the riots were over, did any cop get charged? No, they blamed the whole thing on, ready for this, a writer named Peter Plate. He faced, if I recall, more prison time than Dan White got, and eventually he got off. But imagine the stress on that innocent person's life on that one. The same San Francisco cops who then beat the crap out of people cheering the 49ers football team after they won their first Super Bowl, and Dianne Feinstein, the mayor, praises them for being level-headed under fire until she finds out an 80-year-old financial backer got the crap kicked out of him. Then she launched an investigation, and then she covered it up the day it came out. And then another time, the SF cops even arrested Keith McHenry from Food Not Bombs for feeding homeless people. What kind of a provocateur is this, may I ask? And Keith McHenry looked at life in prison from a 3 strikes charge. Luckily, he skated through. Even a former sheriff, later police chief of San Francisco, called Dianne Feinstein a cop groupie. I'll go one step further. With that police radio she kept in her limo when she was mayor, Dianne Feinstein was a police brutality groupie. This is what happens when the law is not applied to the police. Of course, the SFPD attacked punk shows far more when Feinstein was mayor than at any other time. Funny how they never attacked anything that was controlled by Bill Graham. So you can imagine how scared I got when a woman I knew was raped, and then she had the police drop her off at our house, and the cop laughed and said, well, what do you know, Jello Biafra's house. They knew where I lived. They could get me at any time. Fast forward to, I guess it was now Friday. In Oakland, an eyewitness says that the demonstration, even in Oakland, is peaceful, intentionally peaceful, till plus or minus a dozen white men began tearing down boards, covering a bank window, and smashed the glass and threw a firework inside, started a fire, then marched across the street to the Walgreens and did the same thing, then quickly left just in time for the cops to show up and gas the peaceful protesters instead. Quote, they had hammers and walkie-talkies. They seemed very organized. Then, Santa Monica, California, the next day. This one was all over the news. Looters and arsonists downtown. Well, one of my friend's girlfriend was there, reporting back to him while I was seeing the thing on the news. And yeah, it was weird where one vehicle would come up and they'd break the windows. Then the next one would come up and take stuff. Then the next one would come and the fire would start. And they showed somebody tying a nice mountain bike they got from REI onto what was a very expensive big black SUV. Where did these people come from? License plates were either blacked out or missing, which the MSNBC didn't bother to try and show. Why didn't the cops go after them? And what about all these piles of bricks that have reportedly turned up, conveniently in different places, even a forklift dropping them off, according to somebody in Oakland? BuzzFeed is saying none of that is true, while other people are saying, okay, maybe not in your town, but in our town, where did these bricks come from when there's no construction site anywhere? If this does happen in the future, corner the forklift. Corner the truck, get pictures, get license plate numbers, get pictures of the drivers, and find out what they're doing and why. Instead, what we get is Antifa. It's all Antifa. I've designated Antifa as a terrorist organization. And so now, as Jeff Hall from Disaster Strikes put it, an entire generation of mostly peaceful protesters is going to be criminalized because their faces are caught on all those HD cameras on the traffic lights and the doorbells, the street lights. That's all being saved and forwarded to Wild Billy Barr to do whatever he wants to with it. And now they've started shooting. Playing paintball on people's heads in Denver, where they got a news photographer. Pepper spraying a 70-year-old congresswoman in Columbus, Ohio. Firing rubber bullets. And rubber bullets, they're not like some little pencil eraser like this that just bounce off you or something. Rubber bullets are this big, like this salt shaker, and they're practically as hard as this salt shaker. They're more like hockey puck rubber. They're more like plastic. You get hit with one of those, it'll cut you open, it can blind you, hit in the temple or something. Rubber bullets can kill you. They are intended to maim. And now, people are starting to die. 2 people in a Walnut Mart parking lot in Davenport, Iowa, of all people. Shooters unknown, maybe connected, maybe not. Well, let's see if they do their CSI forensic file stuff, because if they don't, it means it was the cops. That goes same for the thing that goes right. Oh yeah, 6 people shot in Louisville last night. By who? What happened? And the next day, a barbecue stand guy named David McAtee is shot to death, apparently because somebody else, a guardsman heard a shot and fired back and fired him and killed him. And then the mayor at least fired the police chief because the cops didn't bother to wear body cameras. So I don't think a lot of these people doing this who run around with forklifts and the same thing happening all over the country, this isn't Antifa. They're anarchists. They don't have all these brand new black SUVs or whatever. And what is it? NBC found a Twitter account claiming to be Antifa that was actually a neo-Nazi group called Identity Europa. And now Huffington Post is reporting they found a Proud Boys, one of the white supremacist groups, little, chat room where they're talking about what they're going to do to protesters and set them up and stuff. So no, this isn't any of that. Unless, of course, the Proud Boys are a lot more organized and really are financed by Peter Thiel. And until I see proof of that, I'm not going to believe it. But no, this is bigger. This was planned, just waiting for the right demonstration to try out the next move to clamp down more. This is the feds.